Hello everyone, welcome to my game channel AI Game Junction. In this series of videos, we are creating an AI bot from scratch for the Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition. Alright, so let's just do a quick recap of what we learned in the last video. In the last video, we talked about a lot of important topics. The first one was game loop. How does the game loop work? The second one was how do rules work in AI scripting and how do you define a rule. Then we also spoke about the priority order of rules and why is it important. And we also spoke about how do you define constants and why are they important. If you haven't seen this video, please feel free to go to the playlist and watch the first video, and I will also be adding a link in the description below. In today's video, we are going to be talking about how do you modularize your code base so that it becomes easier to manage and read. So we will see how do you split your AI script into different files and then load them into the main file so that the game or the AI engine is able to read all the rules mentioned in all the files that are linked to the AI script. Alright, so without further ado, let's get straight into it. Alright, so let's head back to the editor. If you remember, this is the file that we created in the previous video where we had defined a rule to train a villager and we had also defined a constant value. Now let's see how can we split this logic into multiple files. Before we get into the implementation, let us first talk through the importance of doing so. Imagine if you have an AI bot which is advanced in nature. It has thousands and thousands of lines of code and also has hundreds of rules. And if you want to fine tune and tweak the logic, then navigating to different rules, searching for different rules and everything would become very difficult. Managing the code base would become a nightmare. If you split this logic into different files, then it becomes much more easier to navigate and manage. That's the importance of splitting the different logic into different files. Now let's see how can we implement this. So the logic that we'll try to implement over here is we will move this constant definition into another file. Let's see how to do that. For that, we'll first create a folder. We'll name it Blitzkrieg itself. Within that, we'll create a new file called constants.per. One important piece of info is for all additional files that you create, you don't have to create the .ai file like you had to do for the main AI script. That is only applicable for the main AI script. Now what we want to do is we created a constants file. We want to move this logic to the constants file. Alright, so that is done. Now how do we get that constant file loaded into this so that this rule can actually have access to max villager count constant? In order to do that, there is a very simple command which is load into double quotes. You have to give the path relative to your file. So it is all present in this folder called Blitzkrieg, and within that this will be present in we want to load the constants file from Blitzkrieg. Alright, so now when this file is loaded into the game, what will happen is it will load this constants.per in which your constant is defined, and then this rule will have access to the constant. Let's head back to the game and see this in action. Right, so let's start the game. Okay, so it did not throw any error. The constant that we had defined was max villager count of 4. Since our current number of villagers are just 3, it is creating a 4th villager, but it will stop immediately after it creates the fourth villager, because we would have hit a max villager count of 4. Alright, so we are back to the editor. We just learned how to load constants in a different file, and then how to load that file in the main AI file so that the rules from the constants file can be read into the main file and can be accessed by other rules. So this is the way how you can split your code base and make your code base much more manageable. Now let's talk about another scenario where, let's say, the constants that you want to define are dependent on your match conditions. Like for example, you want to define, let's take a scenario where you want to define constants if the civilization is Huns and different constants for all other civilizations. How can you do that? So here I will introduce you to another concept called loadif. For that, let's go back to our scripting guide and have a look as to how to use these loadif symbols. So the way these loadif symbols are used is when the game starts, essentially there are a lot of different match settings. Like for example, the game type, it could be a death match, random map, etc. Or what is the starting age, what resources you are starting with, what is the map size, is it a team game or a single game, some of the other settings, which civilizations are loaded, right? So this is what you can use to define conditional logic based on the match settings. The scenario that we spoke about, we want to have different constants file if the civilization is Huns and a different constant file for all other civilizations. Let's see how we would do that. Right, so over here, as you can see, Hun civilization is defined by HUN caps hyphen CIV caps. Let's go back to the editor and see how we can put this into action. So the way to define this conditionally is to use this hash load if defined, and we want to use Hun civ, right? This is it, and here we will basically define that we want to load the constants file related to Huns. We will shortly define this as well. The next component of this is else. So if the initial civilization is Huns, then we would load constant Huns. For all other scenarios, we will just copy paste. Let's just copy paste this. We load the original constant file, right? And you have to end this by saying end if. This is how you would write a load if condition based on the different match settings that you start off with. Now we have one thing left over here. We need to create another constants file for Huns. So let's just copy paste this file, and we are going to name this constants for Huns. And let's say for Huns, what we want is we want a max villager count of 5 instead of 4. So now when this AI script is loaded, it will check if the civilization is Huns. If it is Huns, then it will load the constants file related to Huns. In all other scenarios, it will load the general constants file. Now let's go back to the game and put this into action. So we are restarting the game, and we had chosen Franks as a civilization. So in the if else condition, currently the max villager count is 4, it is creating a villager. It will stop creating a villager as soon as the villager count hits 4, right? As you can see, there are currently 3 villagers. Let's just wait for the first villager to be created, and that is complete. As you can see, now you have 4 villagers and the villagers stopped creating. Now the other scenario that we want to test is if we choose Hans instead of Franks, what would happen? So let's reload this game, and instead of Franks, let's choose Hans, right? So the expected behavior over here is that in the other constants file, we had mentioned that max villager count is 5. So now in this scenario, AI should create 5 villagers, after which it will stop creating a villager. In the previous scenario, if you remember, with Franks, it had stopped after creating 4 villagers. And in this scenario, if you see, even if there are 4 villagers, it is creating one more villager, which means that it has loaded from the constants Hans file and not from the general constants file. So this is pretty much about how you can conditionally load files as well. Alright, so in today's video, we learned how to make the code base much more manageable by splitting the logic into different files and then loading that logic in the main AI script so that the bot can have access to the entire logic in the different files. We also spoke about how can you conditionally load different files in the main AI script using the load if directives. If you want to explore the load if directives in much more detail, I will be adding the link of the scripting guide in the description below. So feel free to explore it. In the upcoming videos, we will be covering some more basic topics such as goals. How can you use goals? How can you modify goals in the game? And we'll also be talking about other concepts such as operators, like Boolean operators such as or condition, not condition, etc. If you notice, we are just covering the basic elements of scripting as of now. Once we actually start creating the bot, we will cover slightly more advanced topics like strategic numbers and DUC, which is direct unit control. DUC actually gives you a much more fine-grained control over the rules so that you can achieve a much better micro. But those are much more advanced topics. We'll get there slowly and steadily. If you like our videos, please feel free to share your thoughts and suggestions in the comment section below. And please do subscribe to our channel so that you can get notifications about our videos in the future. Thank you for watching this video. See you in the next one.